Hi, I'm Aaron Maxwell, an instructor at NewCircle and the author of the Advanced Python newsletter. And I'd like to talk to you today about the observer pattern in Python. Now, design patterns in general are very interesting to study for any object-oriented language because they are ways to reusably solve problems in code that are common and come up in many different contexts. Because in languages like Java and C++ and C# and PHP, there's been a lot of research done since the turn of the century. And there's a great big volume and body of literature for us to learn from and use. But in Python, some things are different about how you actually apply them and implement them, because Python has some useful characteristics that the other languages don't have. Features like dynamic typing, features like functions being first-class objects, and other characteristics as well that lets us implement design patterns in Python in a way that is often simpler, more concise, and more maintainable, readable, and useful. Now, with the observer pattern, if you're not familiar with it, the idea of the observer pattern is that you have some root object, which we'll call the observable. And the observable has some way to know when some state changes of interest. We're talking about this very abstractly here, but I'm going to get very specific with it in a little bit. But something will change that the observable will know about. And you'll also have a number of other, let's say, satellite objects that want to know when this happens. You have a number of other entities that want to be notified when this thing changes. So you notice the pattern here, we have one speaking to many. So I actually don't like to use the terminology observable and observers, which is traditional when talking about the observer design pattern. What I like to do is call them the publisher and the subscribers. I think that's more clear. So let's look at this in detail with Python and see how it actually works with some code. Now, let's look at the most simple way you can implement the observer pattern in Python. Now, in these code examples, I'm going to be using Python 3. And if you're using Python 2, don't worry. Pretty much everything applies. All the concepts directly apply. The only thing that's going to be different is a few details of syntax. So you'll be able to follow along just fine. Now, let's look at the code here. I have in this file called observer1.py, because it's our first example. In observer1.py, I have two classes, a subscriber class and a publisher class. The subscriber is pretty simple. Notice it has a method called update. And this simplest variant of implementing the observer pattern, each subscriber must implement a method called update. It doesn't have to be called update, it just has to be consistent and something that both the observer and the observable, the subscriber and the publisher can agree on. And in this case, we have a method called update that takes one argument, which will be a string. Again, it can take any arguments so long as all parties involved agree on it. Now, looking at the publisher class, we have a few interesting things. First, we have a method called init, the constructor, that does one thing. It creates an empty set. A set is a useful data structure to use on the publisher side to keep track of what's going on, because that's all it needs in this case. Then, now we have a couple of methods here called register. And what these do is they allow a subscriber to register itself with the publisher. It allows the observer to register itself with the observable. And this is important because we want to allow any object to register itself with the observer so that it can receive those notifications when the time comes. And register is one side of it, unregister is the other side. With unregistering, you're just saying, I don't want to receive these notifications anymore. Now, how are these notifications sent? What does it mean to send a notification? Well, that's all handled in the dispatch. And it's very simple. In the dispatch method, all that happens is that when this method is invoked, then every subscriber has its update method invoked, passing this argument called message. So notice a couple of things. Dispatch here is just another method. The publisher can invoke it itself. Some other entity can, in certain circumstances, invoke it as well. It really just depends on the architecture of your code and how you want to use the observer. Notice also that the dispatch method takes a message, which in our case is just a string, but of course it could be an arbitrary object or even several arguments that are all arbitrary objects. But keeping it simple here, we say for subscriber in self.subscribers, subscriber.update message. Very simple. Now, how do we use this? Well, now we're going to go to this file called I've called driver_observer.1. It's just a driver script to demonstrate how we use this simple form of the observer pattern. With this simple form of the observer pattern, we start by creating a publisher object. Then we're going to create some subscribers. The next step is that these subscribers have to register with the publisher. Now, there's several ways this can happen. In the example you're seeing here, I just have a top-level few lines of code that register a few of these subscribers. But a subscriber can register itself by calling pub.register passing self as an argument. So we could, for example, design each of these subscribers to, in its constructor, invoke the registration with the publisher as a global variable. It could register itself whenever it's at object creation time. Now, the next step is we call a method to dispatch a certain message. Then one of the subscribers in the next line unregisters, and then we dispatch again. What happens when we run this? We have the first round of dispatch, the message, it's lunchtime. That goes out to all the subscribers. One subscriber decides they don't need to receive these notifications anymore. And when that happens, when we dispatch the next message, time for dinner, only those subscribers that remain receive this message. This is the simplest form of the observer pattern in Python. But we can do much more interesting things with the observer pattern. We can do them in much more concise, readable, maintainable, and to a certain extent fun ways than we could easily in some other languages. Let's see how that works. Now, we just saw the simplest form of the observer pattern and how you do it in Python. And this is a common way to do it where you have a method called update or something like that, as long as it's consistent between observable and observer, publisher and subscriber. But we can do something a little different in Python that gives us more flexibility. And this relies on the fact that in Python, functions are treated just like any other object. If I have a function, f of n, something like that, I can say g equals f. And it's like I'm taking this object and using it over here where I call g of n. And it acts just like the original function because it's the same function, just referenced under two different names, f and g. And everything that works with functions, freestanding functions in Python also works with methods of objects. So we're going to exploit that to give us more flexibility so that a subscriber can register with the publisher even if that subscriber has not implemented a method called update, so that it can pass a different method to register with a different method, or even a freestanding function, something else entirely. So we need to make some modifications. So if you look here, we have first the subscriber class from the simple example above, and we have the publisher just the same as below. And we need to make some modifications to both. Let's start with the subscriber. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make two different kinds of subscriber classes. And I could reuse code a little bit better here, but I'm not going to bother. It's a simple example. And the first class, the subscriber one, has the same interface with the update method, just like in the previous example. But subscriber 2 has a different method under a different name called receive. So what we want to do is make it so that we can actually register subscriber 2's receive method with the publisher. What do we have to do for that? Well, a few changes. First, in the constructor of the publisher class, we need to seed self.subscribers as a dictionary instead of a set. And when the subscriber invokes the register method, we want to provide a function, argument. I'm going to call it callback because conceptually that's exactly what it is. We want the observer to have a callback function invoked, called, when the notification goes out. And that's the channel, that's the mechanism by which the subscriber is notified. Now, what we can do in Python, again, I can say, okay, callback, this argument, this third argument called callback is going to be optional. And if it's not supplied, we're going to fall back to the original, the one called update. Now, that's good. We have a flexible way to invoke the register method now. The way we add subscribers is a little bit different because we have a dictionary now, and we're mapping the subscriber object to the callback. And similarly, with the unregistered method, we're going to have to remove that from the dictionary, which we do in this way. Now, the dispatch. Now, the signature for dispatch is exactly the same, the dispatch method. And the way the dispatch method is invoked does not change. But the way we go through the subscribers and sending all these messages is going to be different. First of all, we're going to iterate through subscriber, comma, callback, and self.subscribers.items. Now, this is Python 3, so items returns an iterator. In Python 2, we would want to say iteritems instead. But once we do this, we have within the loop, we can just call the callback for the message. And we can do anything else in this loop we want, but this is a simple structure that gives us a lot of flexibility in how we work with the publisher and subscriber relationship. Because the subscriber can specify not only, I want to be notified on this state change or when this interesting event happens, but I want you to notify me in this specific way. There's a lot of expressive power in this kind of pattern, and it's a lot harder to do in Java or C++ or PHP or C#. How does this work? Well, I have a little driver script. Going to this, we have, this creates a couple of subscribers, a couple of different types of subscribers, several different types, registers them, and dispatches the two messages we saw before, the lunchtime announcement and the dinner time announcement. So it looks like John doesn't care about dinner. What happens when we run this? Notice what happened. The interesting thing here is that subscriber 2, Alice, does not have an update method in that object. The object for Alice has a method called receive. And that we see as evidence in the output means that she got the message for its lunchtime. So this is an important refinement. It gives you more flexibility in how you can use the observer pattern in Python. But we're not done yet. We can do even more and do it very easily compared to what we can do in other languages. Let's look at how that works. Something we may want to do with the observer pattern is to have an observer that can actually notify one group of subscribers for one kind of situation and notify a different group of subscribers for a different situation. And we can even have subscribers that are in both groups. We can call these different situations events. All that means, it's kind of an abstract term, but all it means is that we have different kinds of notifications. So we can call these different events. Another word we could use is channels. Now, how do we implement this in code? Well, let's look at the code that we just made with the flexibility of how we can notify a subscriber. And I'm actually going to step back. Instead of having two different subscriber classes, let's just go back to one. And in fact, we'll forego that flexibility right now in this example because these are independent of each other and they compose. You'll see what I mean as we go forward. Now with the publisher, we need to make a few changes here because the interface we want to provide is that a subscriber can not only register with the observer, but register for a specific event that that observer can announce. So how does that work? Well, first thing we need to do is modify the constructor of publisher to take several events. And that means that our subscribers attribute of the publisher class is going to have a little bit different structure. We're going to seed it as a dictionary mapping event names, which will just be strings, to dictionaries, which will, each of the dictionaries will map subscriber objects to the callback function or method for that particular event. So the way we're going to initialize this is to use a dictionary comprehension. This is something that works in Python 3, and in Python 2 you can do something similar. You actually can't quite use a dictionary comprehension here in some versions of Python, in all versions of Python, but it's a concise way to describe it, and you can just create the dictionary however you like. Now, we're going to also make a little helper method called getSubscribers. All this does is look up in the subscribers attribute and returns what's the dictionary mapping subscriber to their callback for this particular event. It'll be a little useful. So with register, we need to add a new argument. And I think it makes more sense semantically in terms of the design of the API to put it as a first argument. So let's go ahead and put that there. And again, event is just a string specifying what kind of event or situation or notification the subscriber wants to be notified about. So when we have the signature modified, the callback setup is exactly the same, but the way we insert it into our record keeping of who wants to know about what is a little different. We're going to call the getSubscribers method and pass it the event name. That returns a dictionary, and that dictionary we will then do a lookup with the who and then register the callback in that way. Unregister, similarly, needs to take an event parameter because a subscriber may be registered to several different events, and they may want to unregister to some events but not others. So we look up the dictionary the same way, getSubscribers event. And after doing that, all we have left is the dispatch method. So again, we're going to use a consistent signature. Notice what I've done here. I've decided to design the API of my observer class so that for each of these methods, event is the first argument. That's intentional. Makes it easy to remember when you're writing the code how to the right way to do it. Okay, so we have for subscriber, comma, callback, and self.subscribers. But again, we need to change that. It's a pretty simple change. The dispatch method just has to look up the correct subscriber table for the particular event. So now we have this, and I have a driver here which is very similar to the one we've seen before, just using the new publisher and subscriber class. So let's see how that goes. Great, it works. Notice how we have some flexibility here because we're going back to the driver. We have two different channels here, lunch and dinner, and different subscribers are registered to each, and they get notified appropriately depending on what they're subscribed to. So as you can see, there's a lot of flexibility in how you can implement the observer pattern in Python. And if you try to do all the things we've done in this video using some other languages, you might find, depending on the language, that's a lot more work. And Python's feature set of dynamic typing, functions being first-class objects, and some other attributes and aspects of the language as well make it a lot easier to implement certain patterns, certain design patterns in Python. Okay, so that's the observer pattern in Python. And I hope you got a lot out of it as we look together at all the ways you can implement these design patterns in Python and a lot of the flexibility we have. Now, in closing, I want to point to a few resources for you. First, all the code examples that we work through together are available at the link below at newcircle.com. So you can go there, download that code, work through it, read it, play with it, learn from it. Secondly, as I mentioned, I'm the writer and author and editor of a newsletter in Advanced Python Programming that covers topics like these and more. And you can subscribe to that. Again, all these links are below at mygradeup.com. The last resource I want to tell you about is an advanced Python programming course that I'm teaching. And it's a 4-day course, and we can adjust that to your needs. And it goes into all these topics and more. And it's not for beginners. It's for people who already know Python and already have some experience programming, and that enables us to go into some really fascinating topics. Thanks a lot. I'm Maxwell, and hope you had fun.